thing
Welcome
anymore.
everyone to Ladder Daily Digest. We honor creators and we also honor just people hanging out in Tim Rathbone's living room. And that's what this show is all about, Tuesdays with Tim. Tonight's subject is the movies Heretic and Conclave with all spoilers. Everything is going to be spoiled. And so if you haven't seen the movie yet and you don't want to be spoiled, then you can come back and watch us later. Or you can watch, and then if you're old like me, you can forget all the spoilers you heard anyway, and everything will be brand new when you see it. That's what happens to me every time I see a movie that I've seen before. And so also this is Megan Connor's show as well. And so Megan, tell us a little about your show and what's happening lately.
Welcome, beautiful humans. I have a new episode coming out tomorrow, and I always do a live Q&A after my episode release. And I also am taking enrollees for an e-course that I created about how to deal with difficult people. It's called BullyProof, and it's tips and tricks about how to identify and exit narcissistic and abusive relationships.
All righty. So once you started a relationship with me, you thought you would go in that direction?
Absolutely not. I've been developing this course over the past 6 months, talking to individuals, clients and friends and family members who have been in these types of relationships that really just like suck the energy out of your life. And you know, those people that when the phone rings and you get that like rush of anxiety because you don't really know what to say or how to deal with it. I'm giving people words and tools on how to deal with those types of relationships in their lives and create good boundaries and just have more peaceful interactions.
Oh, I have to change my laundry. That's why I had the show set up. So welcome also, Joe, the Exmo.
Hello.
Exmo Joe.
We almost got a Brady Bunch going here.
Yeah. Joe's channel is Hellfire Agency. And it's all about how to get into atheist heaven.
That's the church.
No tithing required.
Nice.
This is a modest tithing.
Just a small stipend. Go see Heretic. Go see Conclave. Well, you can't anymore.
You know, it's interesting because Heidi Love was the one that turned me on to, you know, we had her on the show last week. And she turned me on to Heretic. I had no idea that it was even coming out. Well, we were talking about Ted Bundy, because that's basically how, you know, Ted Bundy had two sister missionaries show up at his door at that house in the Avenues, and they refused to come in because he was a single man living by himself. And I said in my first episode about blood atonement ever, I'm like, I hated that stupid rule, but I'll say it probably saved those girls' lives, man.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So since we're in Tim's living room, we'll let Tim have the floor and talk about his experience with Heretic first.
Okay. Well, I've seen it twice now, and I went last night. I met a really nice young lady named Ashley. She's an ex-Christian. Spent about half an hour afterwards talking about it. Well, the first thing about any film is the opening and closing scene of a film, or the two most important scenes in the film. As an example, I'll give you The Searchers, John Ford, John Wayne. Begins with the opening of a door and ends with the closing of a door. This one opens, the establishing shot is a cliff. I thought, that's really brilliant. Just the image of that cliff and knowing how concrete and solid it is and what these two young ladies are up against out in the world, because that's how I felt in Germany. Like, you're going up against hard rock every day. And I noticed that, what was her name? Not Barnes. What's her name?
Paxton.
Thank you. Paxton was testing Barnes. I noticed that right off the bat. I didn't notice it the first time. I said, oh, so Barnes is doubting her faith and she's testing her companion. And okay, it's interesting. And then they talk about sex, which, okay. And then climbing the stairs and stuff. Now, one thing that they did that I would never do is approach people on the street when I was on my mission. If I'm out walking, I'm going to leave you alone, you know. But
That's right. So there are things that are pluses and minuses about whether it's accurate to Mormonism or not. But yeah. So what was your overall impression of the movie as it relates to the future of Mormonism? Tim?
Well, we know that the people search for Fanny Alger went up tremendously. I think it'll make people look into it. Well, obviously, it's made people look into Fanny Alger.
That's right. Definitely, people will be cautionary, use caution in Colorado when they go to a house on a rainy day from now on.
Exactly. Yes.
So, Megan, what were your thoughts about the movie?
Well, can I say? I want to share what Ashley said. She was very emotional, and she was very sad and disappointed. She's an ex-Christian, and she's questioning everything right now in her life, and that really brought it to a fore in her life how she's questioning, and she saw that brought a lot of emotion up in her about what she questions and how she's questioning life right now. We talked for about half an hour afterwards about life and things, and just thought it was interesting. And there was a couple, and then there were 3 girls. And I asked the couple what they thought, and the guy liked it, the girl didn't, and the 3 girls said, "We're never going to see a scary movie again." So that, pretty much, that's your 10 o'clock to midnight Bakersfield movie crowd. But I did notice some things when Barnes touched her arm where the IED was. I thought, oh, that's interesting. Picked up on some subtle hints.
I think you meant birth control.
Thank you, birth control.
Yeah. Instead of IED.
That's a weird place to put an intrauterine device, unless you're going to put a uterus in there first.
Yeah. It sounded like you said IED, which was, what is that? Something
improvised.
Improvised explosive device.
That was I couldn't figure out. Yeah.
I was thinking IUD, and I said IUD.
Yeah, I got you. No, I was wondering about that because I remember I thought in the film when she had touched her arm, I had thought it was on her forearm.
It was.
If it was up higher, maybe that makes sense then, because that was one thing I could not figure out was how he would have known. And I did remember that shot of the film, but I thought it was her forearm because there were some faint lines on it, so it looked like she'd maybe had some like self-harm before. I don't know if I'm just misremembering or what was going on there, but if it was upper arm, was it upper? Is everyone in?
It was, yeah. There was a very
quite a guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was one that kind of pulled me out a little bit. Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, so wait, you have a sister missionary with a birth control patch on? Is that what you guys are saying was in this film?
She's got the insert. The implant.
An implant, in her arm. Yeah.
It's what I have
actually. That conversation.
I have it. It's a little, I don't know if I can actually feel it right now. It's right here. Yeah. But it's still like, I mean, it's been there for a while, so I don't really feel it. I had to look for it just now, I guess, but yeah. And I feel like I appreciated that Sister Paxton defended her when Hugh Grant's character, Mr. Reed, tried to insinuate that there was something like bad about her having birth control. I had companions who were on birth control. I wasn't. I kind of wish I had been. I was just afraid of it for a long time. And since I wasn't sexually active, it wasn't something I felt I needed to worry about. But when I finally did go on it just to manage like my my menstrual cycle and symptoms, and especially really, really terrible cramping. It made such a huge difference that I'm really sad that I didn't start it like 10 years ago, honestly. But anyway, I don't know. I really like that because I feel like I know I'm jumping in here on my thoughts. A lot of times when women are depicted in media anywhere, there's a lot of kind of tropes or stereotypes and boxes that women are put into. They're either, you know, intellectual, or they're artsy, or they're a bimbo and stupid. You know, there's just or just like a complete total bitch. Like it's definitely like a villain kind of a type thing. So I really appreciated that these girls were pretty real. And then honestly, another I feel like trope is often is it's either like the best friends or the frenemies. And I appreciate that they didn't do that for this either. They were friends. Obviously, they're there by like circumstance. This isn't like we've grown up together. But I like that they weren't frenemies, that it wasn't that, oh, we have to learn to get along together because of the situation we're in. They were already in it together, and they were even more in it together later. And that was something that I really, really liked, that there wasn't, you know, there were some awkward moments, like, and I feel like that was pretty real for my mission experience too. Sitting in people's houses, sometimes I would say things that would make my companion cringe, and vice versa. We'd be like, why did you say that? Or why did I say that? You know, but it was very realistic in that kind of a way. But yeah, I really
Did you
like
get along with your companions, Maven?
I did. For most of them, I have one that I think is a sociopath. I strongly suspect.
Maven only had tropes as companions.
Right. No, I still keep in touch with, well, it's been a while, but there's several that I did keep in touch with, and then my last couple haven't so much. One has been really difficult for me to find, actually. She's not on Facebook or anything, hasn't been. But overall, I did, except for the one. I can't say for, I guess, how much they liked me per se. My last companion I liked. I don't think she liked me very well. But anyway, those are my thoughts.
So I think it's Megan's turn.
I'd still like to know if anybody's figured out what that water thing, what that represented.
Just a scary thing.
No,
Well,
I'm with
I don't
Tim.
know
think there's
about, like,
symbolism there, but I don't know what it is.
yeah,
Okay.
I don't think anything in this movie was done by accident. And that's one of the things
No.
that I love so much about it. There's so much symbolism, there's so much artistry. And I think everything from the writing to the directing to the acting was just so brilliantly done. They did such a great job of portraying these sisters as not just one dimensional, like you were saying, not just one trope or the other, but like really complicated human beings. I forget what the name of that little water thing is, but it is Japanese. And my thought the first time that I saw the movie was like, why not fix the leak in the roof
Exactly.
rather than set up this elaborate system to dispose of the water? And it was obviously very conveniently timed. Every time that you heard the water drop, it was like there was a new thing that he laid on the girls. You know, it was like he would lay down some kind of fact and there was a beat where they just had to pause, and it was like, bloop, another drop in the bucket, like another thing to consider or think about. So I think there's a lot of symbolism there. This was my second time watching it this morning. I took 8 pages of notes.
Oh, wow.
Wow. All right.
There just was so much to unpack, and just, I don't think that we should gloss over the first scene, because I think so many people just dismiss it as like, you know, that was sensationalistic. Why did they start it that way? Well, when you look at it, they kind of, the conversation's
stuff.
going right,
Sex
and then
talk.
the camera, yeah, and then the camera zooms back, and you see that on the back of the park bench is an ad for condoms, and right next to it is the sister's bike sitting there. So of course they would have come up to this bus stop, set the bike there, seen the ad for condoms. Of course they're going to have a conversation about it, because Sister Paxton is so uncomfortable with silence that she has to say something. And that's such a common thing in female relationships, where you're not quite sure of each other. you're not quite sure what the other thinks of you or what you think of them. It's almost like you have to talk to fill the silence because of that uncomfortable unknowing of something. And so she's over here spewing this story about how I'm not sure how I saw it, you know. And the other point that I think people totally miss is that, you know, they have this conversation about pornography, and Sister Paxton uses it to illustrate that she believes the church is true because the person in the film has this moment of horrific realization that she's done something wrong. And they sort of, you know, go down just a little bit of a road. But then Sister Paxton brings it back and she says, how has God shown you the church is true? So she's using pornography to bear her testimony, which is something Mormons do all the time. They find a spiritual thing in anything. Like, go to any open mic Sunday, and it doesn't matter what the topic is the person is talking about. It could be, I found a sock on the floor, and they're going to find a way to relate it back to how the church is true.
Can I jump in? I
Yes.
did this on my mission.
Of course.
And like, it was even like a game. I didn't try it. I mean, for lessons, I would try to do it just because I was always trying to think of ways to make kind of dry religious stuff make sense or sound intriguing and convincing. So, and I think it is just kind of a Mormon thing to do naturally. But we did this as exercises almost. I had one. She wasn't a normal companion. It was just not a transfer, but what is it? The guys did it. We almost never did it as sisters, but it's the guys do it all the time when they just switch
Trade
out.
off.
A split.
Yeah, split.
A
Okay.
split
Yeah.
or a trade off.
Exactly. Okay, so I was with
a work
it was when I was
visit.
training, and we had switched with the other trainer, and she was like that. So when we were walking around door to door, she would be like, if there was a seashell on someone's sidewalk or it's like part of their front porch decor, she'd be like, relate that seashell to the gospel, relate this wreath to the gospel, relate that squirrel over there to the gospel. And I would figure out ways to do it. So anyway,
where did you serve,
my
Maylin?
object lesson.
I served in Philadelphia. I never did a pornography scene, though, as a testimony of the gospel.
Let me tell you something.
To me, that she was really like describing it so much. I was just like, wow. Even if I had seen something like that and could turn it into something, there's no way I would ever have tried or had a conversation like that to relate it to the gospel on a mission. So that almost kind of did pull me out at the very beginning, to be honest. That did seem a bit too far and a bit too unrealistic, especially when she's described almost like the climax of it, and the girl's face. I'm just like, boy, you're really watching, because you don't jump into the middle, I think, of that part. You have to watch the whole lead up to get to that part. So like, I don't know. That one was a bit tougher for me, but I also understand that I'm ace, and so that my experiences, it might be more realistic, I guess, than I'm capable of understanding. I guess I'll say that. So
in Germany, there is porn everywhere. Okay, anywhere you go to buy a candy bar, these corner stores, billboards, it is everywhere. And after a while, you just don't see it anymore.
It's in the daily newspaper.
Yeah, it's in the news. It's everywhere.
It's just everywhere. Yeah, in Germany.
So
It's similar. It's kind of like that in Peru, and but
It's not porn though. It's just life.
It's life. That's right.
That's
life. That's true. Yeah. So, I mean, we were street tracking one night, Brother Hancock and I, in Essen, and there was nobody on the. There was a foot. What's the English word for it?
Fußgängerzone.
Walkway. Yeah.
The Fußgängerzone. Yeah.
Fußgängerzone. And nobody was on the street, and we were watching television. All of a sudden, this girl pulls her shirt up and boobs pop out, and we turned and walked away. It's like, oh man, you just can't get away from it.
You see, I had that one companion who he was the reason why tigers eat their young. And the one regret I have on my entire mission was that I did not beat this guy the next week, or let this other guy. But anyway, he got into this one guy's face once, and as it went, somehow the guy had actually managed to read the Book of Mormon, and it come up and said, and my companion got in his face about this, and I was like, dude, if he decks you, man, I'll you know. But he said, oh, you I didn't like your Book of Mormon. I said, why not? Well, there's no sex in it, right?
Not enough.
And
Sure.
and true story, man.
Yep,
And we were
breeding.
like, we were like, because to the Germans it's everywhere, and they will fire up Songs of Solomon in a non-Mormon church on occasion just for the laughs. Like the Germans don't think things are funny, but some things that they do actually are, and that was one of them. When you know,
like the
like some guy just comes. Well, some guy just comes up and starts quoting the Songs of Solomon to us, and I knew what it was, and you know, Tiger Food here didn't get it right, and I was like, "Oh, dude, you know," because he's, you know, because Tiger Food only read what the GA, what the, you know, what was written for us to read, and he never read scriptures outside of these are the ones you got to memorize every day, kind of thing. So,
sure. All right, Rob, your take on the movie?
I am so excited to talk about this movie. I loved it, and it was so refreshing to see Mormons portrayed not as complete dupes, and to see women portrayed as theologically intelligent. That was wonderful, and I credit the screenwriters who spent 10 years preparing this and interviewing sister missionaries repeatedly. So they did their homework, and I appreciate that. I want to credit some of my thoughts to Anthony Miller, who did an excellent review of the film. I consider the protagonist to be Sister Paxton. The movie begins with her, and it ends with her, and she's the only one that survives. I mean, maybe she survives. We don't know. But I think she's the hero on a journey because she is never she never submits to the mental control of Mr. Reed's one true religion. And evidence for this.
She's always pushing back.
Yes, she's willing to talk about porn. She can believe in reincarnation. She's willing to go through the disbelief door. She will not use the apologetic answer for polygamy. She's willing to tell a white lie about a phone call from the Relief Society president. And as they enter this home, which could be looked at as a reversal of the endowment ceremony, where they start out in a very safe room where it's bless this mess, then they move into another room where it's more like a chapel, and then they descend deeper and deeper. The whole time they're given the illusion that they have choice, but in fact they don't have choice. They're headed towards one true religion. They're headed towards certainty. But Sister Paxton, although she may be physically entrapped, mentally she's never entrapped. In fact, when she prays, her prayer is not like a vertical to God save me prayer, but a horizontal prayer of gratitude. And when she finally escapes this madness of this house by essentially being born again, by coming through the birth canal of the window, she escapes the physical control, but she was never under his mental control, because she's able to live out of sincere love and attribute her own meaning to things rather than the ones prescribed to her. And for all those reasons, I loved it. What did you think?
When I saw it the first time, I liked the first 2/3, and I thought it fell apart in the end. Last night, I got it. In fact, even though they knew they were going to get stabbed, I jumped the 2 times when he cut her neck and he put her in the belly.
Yeah.
So, and I see the birth canal when they're
There's a temple reference as well.
Descending
your
down.
And your belly.
Yeah, the signs and tokens, or the penalties.
Penalties.
Yeah.
And so, Rob, you're saying that she makes up her own rules, so she's the one that would play Monopoly, where you put the money into the middle of and when they land on
free parking.
Money from the free parking. When you're on free parking, you get the money.
Sure. Yeah.
The extra Monopoly rules.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, Joe.
The tell-all for me that I'm surprised I still haven't heard anybody say is the mention of the shot her cell phone, when she finally makes it out of the house. That's the point where I start rebuilding it backwards. And there's the shot of her cell phone on the ground, and it says no signal. And you never see it acquire signal. And I went, I get it. I got it now. So, okay.
I don't get it.
Okay. She never makes it out of the house. The comment, this is the key. The comment about the magic underwear, which is the pact she has with her companion. If I say magic underwear, that's the key to stab him and get out of the house. This is all spoilers, right? That's what we're telling
All
him,
spoilers.
right?
That's right.
Right. That comment, he comes up to her and he says to her, magic underwear, never happens. He kills her in the basement because his religion is to teach them, you must understand that the church is lies, the church is control, and the true salvation, the true gospel is learning to see through that. Even if it is all lies, you would rather believe and become a better person, which is the prayer she offers while she is dying. She is telling him that
at the end, she's having a near-death experience where she can imagine anything she wants.
So Barnes doesn't come and kill him then?
No.
She is dreaming that whole experience. And that's why she sees the butterfly when she thinks she's outside.
Yes. Right.
So yeah, the butterfly is just interject here. Did anybody here see Sucker Punch?
Well, I saw it.
Oh,
okay. A lot of the themes you guys are talking about here were in that movie as well. But yeah, Sucker Punch. Sucker Punch, they actually had the butterfly there showing that it is the flip side of whatever you think you're saying. The butterfly indicates it's not. You're in the flip side of what's going on.
Right. So when she tells them on the couch, they're sitting on the couch, and she tells them a story about the butterfly, and it feels really awkward. You're like, why did this missionary break off into the story about, I imagine I'm like a butterfly, and
Well, there was a butterfly in the room also. Remember, there was a butterfly in the living room.
Well, there were moths, right?
Okay.
So, but the moths you later see underneath the tipper with the water, right?
Right.
So the house is the church. The rain is all the reasons to have doubts in faith. And the leaks are all the problems in church historiography. And the church's
Ooh, well done. Holes in the story. Yeah. Well done, man.
He is the tipper. He represents Satan and Jesus in a way.
So here's one thing I'll say. Is he's a horrible missionary for atheism because he's just converted to people that can't convert anybody else.
Oh, no. He's not truly an atheist in his heart. He believes. And
we're going to bring somebody else in now. Bob. Bob, it looks
did
like
I blow your mind, Tim? Did I blow your mind?
I got my mind.
I got so much more.
Go. Feed us.
Well, can I push back on one little thing? I love that idea, and I think it's super creative. The only reason that I'm going to push back on it is because I noticed that I did see that there was no signal. There's no cell phone signal when she got out of the window. And then her coming through that field kind of as white as snow with the sun shining behind her and everything. And then she's on the ground and you see her with the butterfly on her finger. I don't know if you noticed, but when she first hallucinates that butterfly, like her finger is completely clean. It's completely intact. There's nothing wrong with it. The butterfly is sitting on the edge of it. And then it cuts away. The butterfly leaves. And when you see her finger, it's covered in blood. It's bruised. And you can tell that it's shaking. And the butterfly's gone. And then she gets up and she goes. So for me personally, witnessing that like the second time around, trying to really wrap my head around what she's experiencing, it's kind of like when you experience extreme terror and abuse, you sort of go into a dissociative state where you sort of just are like your only focus is on survival. And I personally think that was her coming out of her dissociative state and going, okay, I can't stop here. I have to get up and move along. I like your idea, Xmojo, and I think it's a great explanation. For me, I noticed that her finger changed. It was clean and pristine. It had the butterfly on it. And then the butterfly was gone, but you could see all of the bruising and all of the blood all over her hand. So it was almost like, okay, this is reality now. I'm curious if you have a take on that part of it.
I like your version much better than what I think the movie actually had. I love that. Well, I'll tell you where with the other thing that really makes it pivotal to me is when you see her ascend through the house, which is the church, and also ascending from hell, where she discovers the truth about religion and about faith and about herself and about the nature of reality. And then that's hell. And then she returns and she's ascending all the way eventually out the attic, which is heaven, right? It's her ascension. The only way to get to heaven is to die. So, but discovering the truth in his religion, discovering the truth sets her free. But going to heaven, she has to die, and so that's why it is. But the key for me, then, the middle piece of it is the model of the house. If you don't watch carefully, you could totally miss it. But he's building the model of the house and placing them as they go through in the model of the house. And then when you see her run upstairs after killing him because of the magic underwear comment, you'll see that she is running through the model of the house, not through the house. And that's because the house is the church. The model of the house is the gospel. It's the internal belief that if I follow the church's teachings, I'll make it to being a better person and be saved that way, even if there is no afterlife, even if there is no heaven or hell, even if there's no signal, at least you will have lived in the model that is that is not the leaky house. It is the internal perfect version of the leaky house, where there are no leaks, where things make sense, and where you're going to become a better version of yourself. So the point is to live in the model house, even if the house is actually leaking down on you, and some a-hole is tipping that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
That
I love it.
if they're in the base,
And I'll just say that on Mormon Stories last week, the writers they're there, and they said they purposely wrote it so that people could sort of negotiate the movie as scriptures any way they would like. Just like Dan McClellan says, everybody negotiates things. So they didn't want it to be, but I'll just say the movie's really about selling more Monopoly games. That's the
right.
These boys have so much money tied up in Parker Brothers. It's I saw that too. I saw it too. No, but here's
look for that house to be sold by Play School or something like that.
The Heretic house. I'm gonna make it. If they don't, I'm gonna
Barbie Dream House.
The Heretic Nightmare Fuel. The Gospel House. The blueberry pie candle is what?
Yes.
I'm asking.
It's the ether.
It's the ether. Yeah.
It's I
It's
put
the
you.
drug.
I put you.
The
It's
drug
the
of
Book
religion.
Of Mormon.
It's what lures you in.
It's the Book of Mormon.
The bait.
Okay.
It's a blueberry.
So
right?
it's only
It has the scent. It has the scent of the pie. It has the scent of the scripture.
Not the pie.
The scent of the real deal, but it's not. It's a facade. It's smoke and mirrors.
And eventually it'll poison you.
It's meant to get you into the leaky church. Get deeper and deeper and deeper.
Candle said, manufactured by Rock and Hat Incorporated.
I like
it's there long enough to keep you sort of mesmerized while you sort of get the rest of the mental poison that's going to happen. I'm curious if anybody else noticed how many times they said the phrase magic underwear.
4 or 5 times.
4 times.
4 times.
The girls pulled it down.
The first time?
That's the first time. The second time was when they come up with the code word.
when they come up with the code word. So what I want to focus on is what happens immediately after magic underwear every time. The first time they say magic underwear, she gets pantsed and she's humiliated in public, right?
Right.
Skirted, if you will.
Right.
The second time is when they come up with a plan. And immediately
Right.
after she says magic underwear is when Reed comes down into the basement with them, essentially sealing the fate of one of the girls, right? Anybody remember the third time?
Yes. The
Didn't get
third
out all
time
the
was
way.
the third time was when she said, and he stabbed her in the neck.
Right.
And then the fourth time was when she stabbed Reed when Paxson stabbed Reed in the neck.
Yeah.
I said
Just to
magic
me,
underwear in my mind
it's
about
just
10
symbolic to me. It's kind of like the code word for the next bad thing that's going to happen to you is magic underwear. You know,
Well,
it was
but can
Don't
I
talk
just
about that magic
interject
underwear,
here?
man.
When you get your magic underwear is when you are stripped down and you are kind of there naked, humiliated, right? That was kind of a parallel to, you know, I mean, I don't know how it happens to women, but for dudes, when we're in there, we were buck naked with a sheet, you know, and
Yep.
that was it, right? And so we were stripped before we were able to put those on.
Yeah.
And so when you're, you know, when she got skirted, but whatever, right? That was, I mean, all the steps there had something very similar to do with the temple experience, you know?
Yeah.
And even though it's not the current one to, you know, have your throat cut and be disemboweled and all that, but those every time that you're citing it is there's something negative associated with getting it with your garments and the experience of that first time getting them.
Yeah, and I think it is indicative of the temple penalties because the first time you're stripped down, the second time evil comes in, the third time it's the throat, and the last time it's the throat again. So it's like, I think that's super indicative of those initial temple penalties.
Do you remember the moment where he confronts them about it? Well, it's one of the many moments he says, "I disclosed everything to you, and from the moment you walked in the door, I've been disclosing things to you." And he said, "Do you remember what I said to you about your phone not working?" And they said, "Yeah, that there was no signal." And he goes, "No," and he makes a very big point of this. I said that there was metal in the walls of the house.
They were in a Faraday cage. They were basically in a Faraday cage.
What is the metal in the walls?
Well, in a Faraday cage, it would be copper.
The leaky house. The leaky house is the doubts, the lies, the doubtful historiography of the church, right? The metal in the walls that causes you to lose your signal is the money. It's the metal in the walls in the church. It's material ambitions. It's materialism, and that's from that moment on. They can't connect to the only missionary who comes to check out to see if they're okay, who's looking for them, who doesn't have a companion. For a couple guys who spent all that time.
Could have been the ward mission leader, whatever.
He was wearing a name tag.
But
did you notice?
Ward mission leaders do have name tags.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, maybe I'm
or
wrong.
they used to.
But here's what I would say real quick about Ex-Mojo's thing. Since it prevents communication, it's the only use trusted sources mantra.
Thought control.
Exactly.
I really like that. Go ahead.
I've built Faraday cages, and you have to use a lot of copper. Copper will be what resists the signal. What are pennies made out of?
Bingo.
Well, not anymore, but
zinc.
Zinc. Hey, Maven.
zinc.
But so if you're going to build a building that's going to eliminate that, you will have to have you have to have copper in a very specific weave, and you could shut down any radio signal going in or out.
Anything going in or out.
And his wife built that house, and so the moral of the story is his wife was crazy.
Or a very good engineer,
or a good engineer.
I wanted to comment about the guy, the ward mission leader, as we're guessing that he is. This was a callback because people had been talking about parallels and that there basically a lot of Chekhov's guns. Anything that is brought up will come back into play later. I feel like one way that didn't pay off for me maybe was this guy. I thought, or at least maybe not in the way that I thought. I thought the payback would be that at some point he would come in and he would have the cavalry. And that I think that is pretty typical for this type of trope, maybe if they were going for a more positive ending. And the fact that he didn't actually seemed quite fitting for me. And also the part, like when he was there at the door and the girls were screaming to try to get his attention, and the fact that he couldn't hear them, I really felt that that's a really good representation of women in the church in general. There's a lot of pain, and there has been, like, since its inception, and I feel like the men are oblivious to our cries and our screaming. So the fact that, you know, it just, I mean, he was kind of concerned. He was concerned enough to check in, and I feel like that kind of tracks as well. There's just enough to like make the appearance of like, how are you ladies doing? But don't really say, I don't really want to know. I'm just checking off this like home teaching, visiting teaching, priesthood leader, you know, box, and I would appreciate it if you are fine and we can move on. And so that's kind of how I felt. And the fact that, yeah, that he didn't come through for them, and that, you know, it was really up to them, just felt really fitting to me. And also, again, like more strong. I'm kind of glad that the man didn't come at the end, even if they got out of the house and then that's when ambulances and cops were there. Like I'm kind of glad that the male didn't come riding in on a horse to save the women. I think that's fitting.
And it's like the message, that the home teaching or visiting teaching message that he handed.
Yeah, I have a yes and for Maven. I love that, Maven. Thank you for pointing that out. I want to point out too, did you notice that we've had, you know, this, by the time we get to this elder or ward mission leader or branch president, whoever he happens to be, it's been dark for a long time. The storm has been going on for a long time. He doesn't check on those girls or call to look and see where they are or anything like that until he looks on the sign-up sheet and sees that they haven't done their chores for the evening. The name and the date isn't there in the bathroom sign-up where they have to check off another chores. That's the only time when he goes, maybe I should go find him.
That's a good point. That's a very
good point.
Topher Grace is Jesus. He comes, he's lost. They went into the leaky church that has too much metal in the walls. They lost their signal to him. So when they've been missing long enough, he comes to find them, but they can't reach him because they're inside the leaky house, way too far down close to the truth, separated from him by the metal in the walls. And all the lies or all the doubts being dropped down on them in the moth cage in the bottom of the house. Right?
A good one.
So if you live in this house, you lost, you're damned, you go to hell. That's because that's how you get used in the game. You get continued. Those are the girls who saw the trap door and went, I'm not going to go down there and see if there's a dead freaking person down there. And they try to escape. And he's like, no, now you have to stay forever. So then he takes them down and he makes them part of the game. The ones who win, who get saved and are liberated by the truth, he kills them. And then their souls go through the house, the model house, up through the attic to become the butterfly, to be liberated.
Rob had something to say, I think.
Okay, sorry.
No worries. I wanted to say that this is a horror movie that includes gore, violence, very disturbing images. The thing that disturbed me the most was watching how these socialized females were so they felt this need to be cordial, to keep sweet, even as their safety is rapidly disappearing. And I just wanted to grab the screen and say, fight, you know. Little do they know this will end in, being encaged. And I just thought for women, that was a huge message. And I'm glad it was in the film, but it was very disturbing to watch.
Is that
I think
being nice to missionaries?
Well, it's be nice, period. It's be nice, period. Like that's the messaging that I got as a young woman growing up in the church, was to be nice. And nice is not the same as kind. It's not the same as good. Nice means you allow yourself to be bullied. You allow yourself to be gaslit. And then when you're bullied and gaslit, you say, thank you. Like the girls are on their way down to the basement. You've seen the terror in Sister Paxton's face. She's been crying. She's been upset. And yet, as soon as they make the decision to go down to the basement, she says, thank you again for your super great mentorship, Mr. Reed. We just really want to say thanks for being such a great host. It's like they're going to their death and she's saying thank you. And that's why the prayer at the end disturbed me so much too. Like you pointed out, Rob, that it was not a prayer of save me, heal me, get me out of this situation. She literally said, thank you for all the trials you've given me and the paths that you've laid out before me. When it's same thing that I said last week. I feel like a broken record. When you can get people to gaslight themselves, when you can get women to oppress themselves, when you can get them to say thank you for harming me, game over.
Now, how did he figure out though that Paxton was lying? How did he know she had a secret?
That's all.
She lied about the phone call, right? And I think that was probably the first time that he, caught her in a lie.
Okay.
Right? Because she said, I got a phone call, and he said no,
Right.
Because there was metal.
There's
right?
metal in the walls.
Yeah, and so I think that's when he said, I knew that you were willing to tell a little white lie to, get what you wanted. But he lied too, so then there's the hypocrisy there as well. He said, oh, I forgot to set the pin on the timer, and so therefore you're stuck. Like, he didn't forget. He did it on purpose. And then he told the girls he didn't have a phone, but when the elder came to the door, he was like, would you like to use my phone? So he's not telling the truth either.
So I'm going to now bring in the interview I did with a guy that wanted to join, but he has something else to happen. And so all of us that's seen it could take a 5 or 6 minute break, and I'll play this thing, and we will come back and maybe talk a little bit more, and then transition to the next movie. And let me press play now. And I have with me Kyle Shears, who is a Mormon historian from the Baptist minister's point of view. About how long ago did you see the movie?
2 weeks ago now.
And it was Heretic.
When we met. It was Heretic. Yeah.
What did you think about the movie?
Yeah. So I don't like the horror genre, but I'm keenly aware of how Mormonism is portrayed in popular culture. So that was the draw for me. I wanted to see, kind of knowing the synopsis of the film and what it was going to be about, or what I thought it was going to be about. I wanted to be aware of how Mormonism was being portrayed, especially with it being 2 young sister missionaries in this horror film. My assumption going into it was that they were going to be these young, naive women that are just toyed with by some kind of evil mastermind and religion, belittled, mocked in roundabout ways. The opening scenes, it didn't leave me feeling any better. I thought that was the trajectory we were going. But I was 30 minutes into the movie, my guard fell, and I realized that the directors and the writers were doing something completely different than I've ever seen before with Mormonism and popular culture. And that was portraying them as convicted in their beliefs, regardless of what you think about them, and actually being the protagonist heroes of the story, not just being props to be punched around by some kind of evil antagonist. So it got my attention, and it ended up being, all in all, I believe, a really good film and one of the best psychological thrillers that I've ever seen.
Yeah, there's a lot of, somebody said, wow, those sister missionaries have to act scared for like an hour and a half.
Yeah, that's right. The acting was phenomenal. Even Topher Grace, who plays an elder or a bishop or somebody coming to check in on the sister missionaries. Everyone did.
We can do spoilers if you want, because we're going to just say anything. So what did you think about the comparison to Monopoly?
That was really clever. So if your audience hasn't seen it yet, there's going to be a sequence in the film where the antagonist, Mr. Reed, who is, the best thing I could describe him is this kind of post-new atheist, materialistic, naturalistic, evil man who has a deep disdain for religion and faith.
Only
He
because he
provides-
studied it for 50 years. No, I'm just kidding.
Correct. Only because he studied it. Well, and I think there's an undercurrent of hurt that he had by religion at some point in his past that is never addressed, but it's only slightly alluded to, which is a common theme. As a pastor, I see it. He's going through and he's explaining his theory of the development of religion by likening it to different iterations of monopoly. The first being one that nobody's ever heard of, that was created by a feminist woman. The second one being the one we're all familiar with. The landlord game is then picked up by a man who sees its potential, sells it to Parker Brothers. Is that right?
After redesign.
And then after a redesign, and then it has that familiar layout that we all know. And then you have like an additional iteration of Monopoly after that, which is themed specifically to a place or a location. The final iteration he calls the zany regional spinoff, with a picture of Bob Ross on the front. And as you have these 4 iterations being developed, he likens them to the Judeo-Christian tradition as it develops, first from Judaism, then to Christianity, then to Islam, and then finally the zany regional spinoff is Mormonism. He plops the Book of Mormon down next to a picture of Bob Ross, which, if it's an iteration of Monopoly, the choosing of Bob Ross, I think, is an important point there, because everybody loves Bob Ross, but let's be serious, he's a bit goofy, and he's kind of making it up as he goes along. And I think that's the subtle critique that the antagonist is giving about Mormonism. As far as it being an iteration, is that what you're asking me? Like, what do I think about his theory of iterations?
Sure.
Yeah, this is a really interesting thing to think about, because for Mormonism, especially when it comes to like the gospel as it's understood in their faith tradition, covenants made with Adam in the garden, ordinances passed on from dispensation to dispensation, there's really at the core not a lot of wiggle room to permit iteration or development as far as those things are concerned. So that was one of the thoughts that popped into my head, like how would a Latter-day Saint understand what the writers or the directors are trying to say. From a Christian perspective, though, I have less of a problem with iteration, especially within a religious tradition. My faith tradition has grown as revelation has increased. So, for example, if you're talking about like the difference between the Old and the New Testament, the most obvious iteration of God's self-disclosure to the world is the incarnation, death, and resurrection of his son. If that man claimed to be truly God and truly man, what does that mean? It takes the church 400 years to finally articulate the doctrine that we know today as Trinitarianism. So that layering on, or that adding kind of an understanding of who God is and what God is doing and what he plans to do in the future, that bothers me less than I think the antagonist, if I was in their situation, would have wanted. But for a Latter-day Saint, like, I'm not really sure how they would, even if the writers and the directors it knew what they were poking at when they said these things kind of develop as they move through time.
That's right. And even for Christianity, the 400 years included snuffing out smaller movements and not being successful all the way. There's the Roman Catholic Church, there's the Eastern Orthodox, there's the Coptic, right? Just sure, like for Mormons, there's the Utah Brighamites, there's the Community of Christ that used to be called the Reorganized Latter-day Saints, and there's the FLDS, sort of as the 3 major branches. And I read somewhere that there was like 300 different iterations of Mormonism, of which there might be a few dozen that have more than 30 members or something like that.
Yeah, or less. Stephen Shields has a great book. It's in its 5th edition right now. That traces a lot of those movements, and it might even be more than 300 if memory serves me correctly.
That's right. Well, thanks, Kyle. We'll share this with our show, and hopefully other people will comment on it. And
Whoa.
And we're back.
Okay.
And we're
Okay.
back. So what'd you think about Kyle?
I liked his comments.
I'm very glad that you interviewed him and got a non-LDS perspective on this movie. Not a big fan, though, myself, of a God who's going to let his children flail around for 400 years for the next iteration of trying to figure out what the heck is God and what's going on. But I liked his perspective.
I also am not a fan of that God, so I'm with my cousin Rob on that. We're against that God, and to hell with that God.
There you go. So that sort of concludes the heretic portion, but we can always come back if somebody else wants to come in and say something about that. And now
the only thing that sorry, just one question for the group, because there aren't very many people in my life that I can ask about these things. Did anybody catch the symbolism that he was writing on the table when he and Paxton were sitting there at the table, and he puts the knife on the table? He draws 3 circles. He says, "This is us." He draws another line. He draws an arrow. I was trying to figure out what those symbols reminded me of, and I thought maybe they were Reiki symbols, but then when I went to look at my notes, I was like, no, that doesn't match anything that I have. So I was trying to figure out if there was some other kind of religious symbolism that he was trying to do, because I don't believe anything in this movie was not symbolic of something,
Everything was
So I don't know
symbolic.
if anybody else caught that, or if it was, I don't know, as a last ditch effort, I was like, maybe he was trying to do the plan of salvation drawing or something like that, and didn't quite get it right. But I don't know. That's one of the things I would ask the writers if I had them.
I don't know what the symbol means, but I did want to say my belief about what was the purpose and point of this film was to show the viewer that things are not what they appear to be, whether that's Mr. Reed's house, Mr. Reed, the blueberry pie, the miracle. Question everything and don't be controlled. That's what I took from the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And be in charge of yourself.
That to be, I took from it that his point in his religion is to be controlled by the religion is hell, even if it's temporary in this life. And the truth is to have hope, not just to know the truth, or which would be atheism, but to discover a hope of you bettering yourself by believing something that may be a lie, but at least is a useful lie that teaches you to be. And then again, nothing that the church teaches is in her version of the prayer of what the gospel is, because her gospel, her internal gospel, is the model house, not the leaky house. It's the perfect version that's inside of her, that she has ascended. Once she ascends that, everything else is from her imagination. That's why he knows the code word. That's why Sister Barnes has the birth control implant in her arm after they had this conversation specifically about how Sister Barnes doesn't ever have sex with people, and didn't, she was a good Mormon girl. She lived the gospel principles, and that's all inside here. That's inside Sister Paxton going, come on, she's used birth control. She uses birth. She likes it like everybody else. She's just judging me. She just doesn't want to tell the truth about what's going on. These are all her perspectives of the truth of the characters around her playing out in her mind as she gets to the end and says, I'm not a perfect person. I look at dirty things on the internet. I do all these bad things, but I'm trying to be good. I'm trying to live inside the model house and not let the leaky house drown me into being one of the moths down in the basement. So
the sisters represent the fact that all Mormons are cafeteria Mormons.
Yes. Pick and choose.
Like Taco Bell.
Gross. Actually, there was one other thing that came up while you were talking, Ex-Mojo.
Wait, where's the mute button? Just teasing.
Feel free to mute me whenever I talk too much. one of the things that I don't think that the end was a fantasy, and not that I don't like that idea, because I really do. Like, I like that perspective. It's so different than what I was thinking, but it was very important to me that the thing that killed Mr. Reed was a wooden board with 3 nails on it. Couldn't escape that, reference to Christ being the thing that kills the atheist. I don't know. There was that part. And then the last thing is when Paxton is sitting at the table, Reed is drawing his little drawing. He puts the knife on the table like, you're going to be convinced to do yourself in. And here's why, because you want to know if the miracle's true. As soon as he gets up from the table, she puts the knife in her coat pocket. Right? And then when she gets to the bike lock, she takes the bike lock out of her coat pocket. She opens the bike lock. I don't remember when the coat disappears. I think it's when she gets into the room with the cages, she takes the coat off, maybe to help one of the other women warm up or something.
She puts the coat on one of the women.
Yes. Okay. And that's what kills her, because she leaves her coat behind. It's got the knife in the pocket, and Reed finds the knife and comes and finds her.
No, she had the knife. She had that's a letter opener. She had that.
Yes, that's true. She did. But where did that come from? Because the knife that Reed gave her while she was sitting at the table was not the letter opener. It was the other knife, the one that ends up in her stomach. But when she was sitting at the table, she took that knife and put it in her coat pocket.
It was a magic trick.
He took their coats when they came in the house, and he took them downstairs with the bikes all the way down to the bottom. She got the coat back when she got down to the basement, to the sub basement. That's up until that point. She doesn't have the coat.
The coats were in the room where we had that thing about. We're talking about the Monopoly room. Let's call it Monopoly.
Right. They got their coats back before they went to the basement the first time, because the whole time the prophetess thing was going on, she was holding her coat closed like this, but then she had the letter opener, right? So anyway, it's just an unfinished tie for me. But what I noticed was, and somebody else actually pointed this out to me, when she got to the room with the women in it, if she had kept going, she would have found her way out, but she stopped to help the other women. And when she took her coat off, the knife that was in her pocket from when she was sitting at the table, she didn't have access to that anymore. And that's when Reed got it and came down and found her. So anyway, it's just this thing in Mormonism where we're told to like stop and help other people rather than helping yourself get out. Anyway.
I like that a lot, because here's the thing, that he puts the cages at the exit of the house. He can't let them leave the house. They'll spoil everything. So either they have to stay in that room in the cages forever, or to be used in the game, or they have to be set free by killing them. And that is, for me, that is polygamy. It's a trap set to keep the women into the church. And at the end of the day, it's this misogynistic treatment of women that is keeping everybody perpetually in the game, trying to save them, trying to save the machine somehow. But their women are being used to control by causing them to sacrifice themselves, which I think is an especially poignant perspective. I liked this movie, guys. I thought it was really well done. So,
yes.
One last
after
symbol.
watching it a second time, I saw it as a much better film.
Yeah. One last symbol to support Exmo Joe's symbol perspective is that, just like in Dante's Inferno, he goes lower and lower, and when he reaches the base of hell, he realizes he's actually on the top of a mountain. And so sure enough, in this film, as they get into the basement, the camera flips upside down. So
and you also have that image of that cone.
Yes, which is paradise from the Divine Comedy. Was on the wall as she comes after she comes up the model staircase instead of the house staircase. Paradiso is on the wall if you look carefully from Dante's Inferno.
Paradise, yes.
Okay, Ready to start talking
Awesome.
about Conclave?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
I really, really like this movie.
Yeah, it was good.
Kind of more cerebral.
Very. It's a masterpiece. You know.
Not too many.
It has a lot of
scenes.
symbolism in it, but not nearly as much as Heretic. But there's a lot of symbolism in it, and there's a lot of really good takeaways for the Mormon Church. I thought I was like, wow, this is a lot like the Mormon Church, actually.
Yeah.
Do we get into it? Mm-hmm.
Let's go.
That's a spoiler alert. The tortoise is the dead giveaway. That's like the best thing. At the end, when Father Lawrence finds the tortoise and picks it up and puts it back, because he is the tortoise from the tortoise and the hare. And so you realize all the people who have accused him throughout the whole thing of being ambitious. I never realized until now how ambitious you were. No. He's been gunning to be Pope the whole time. He's been coordinating all of this the whole time. And you're like, oh, and we liked you. I liked you because you were humble. I'm like, make that guy Pope. And it's like, that was the game the whole time. And I loved it. And I can keep going, but of course I can.
Well, he would have been Pope, though.
Right.
Except for the explosion. He would have been Pope.
Except for the miracle. There was a
miracle. Right. The miracle. Right. Yes.
Which is a two-sided miracle when we discover that the only true God-chosen Pope would be someone who is intersex, someone who is not, is someone who doesn't fit into any gender box as defined by society, and where all of society would misjudge that person on the basis of either their chromosomes or their body. They're one or the other. But God,
I loved that.
I once said in a religion class that God is both man and woman, because it says right in Genesis, God created man in his image, male and female created he them.
Well, it's like I said in the chat.
That's the show. No, I'm just kidding.
Mm-hmm. It's good to see you guys.
Who's next?
Yeah, go ahead. Someone was started.
Oh,
I am what God made me to. I am who God made me to be, or
yeah.
I think that's the best line.
I am as God made me.
God created me.
Yeah, I am as God made me. Yeah, or something like that. Yeah, that's right.
So I remember watching it and thinking, oh, this is what I thought the Roman Catholic Church was like picking the Pope when I was a kid, because God's way was the way the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints did it, and this politicking way was the way that the Roman Catholic Church did it. Now I'm thinking that all the politicking in the Mormon Church actually happens among the Quorum of the 70, and then when they get into the Quorum of the 15, it's just whoever lives longer.
That's right.
Well,
I have an unpopular opinion. I don't know. I mean, I'm not really a conspiracy theorist for the most part, but I think that the timing of Elder Ballard's death was very convenient.
Poison.
And I hate to even say that out loud, because I don't want to, I don't know, it feels so gross and sinister to me. But at this point, I wouldn't put it past him.
Here's what I thought would be better than that.
But he's after Oaks.
But if all he had to do is be ordered to not take his vitamins for the next week or whatever, right? So there would be no poison. He would be taking one for the team. It's like, well, we're going to take care of your family. You just go away, so the problem goes away for the corporation. But I didn't say that out loud. This will be.
Is the problem Tim Ballard? Are we just going to say it? I mean, are we afraid that Tim Ballard's going to sue one of us? But yes,
I'm not afraid of that. I'll tell all the truth things about Tim Ballard. I have absolutely no fear whatsoever of that man. He has been a grifter since the beginning. But maybe Elder Ballard was convinced to go on a vitamin and medication fast for a week or something. it's just, I don't know. It feels like the cardinal sin for Mormonism is always like making the 15 look bad, or doing something that is going to make them look bad, or being affiliated in some way with some kind of scandal or something like that. And we've seen it happen throughout the entire history of the church. I mean, look at how many church leaders in the early church were excommunicated because they said something unkind about Joseph Smith, or
Half the
true, said
quorum of the
something true.
12, half of the first quorum of the 12, and Sidney Rigdon or Oliver
John C.
Cowdery.
Bennett,
John
Sidney
C.
Rigdon,
Bennett.
like
There were
all of the
bloodless
3
hits
witnesses of
and
the Book of
bloody
Mormon.
hits.
I watched a thing just today or yesterday about Eldridge Smith. I didn't have any idea about the last patriarch of the church, patriarch of the church, patriarch to the church. You know, the last one to get the job of Joseph Smith Sr. Please, Dad, don't drink. Please, Dad, please, we're trying to keep you sober. Please keep your post in the church. The last person to hold that job, they muscled him out because because it was clear to everybody, this is the last great challenge to the authority of the Big 15, is that, technically this guy is supposed to be the ruler of overall the church,
That's right. That's why Kimball got rid of him. That's right.
And because he said some of the most disgusting racist things any Mormon leader has ever said.
Mm.
Yeah, and that's saying something considering we have Brigham Young.
I know.
Well, I'd like to take a stab at Conclave.
Well,
no pun intended.
Yeah, right. No, I love the movie. I think the purpose. Well, here's my favorite line from the movie. The line was, "There is one sin which I have come to fear above all others: certainty. It is the enemy to unity." I think that was the message. And then he goes on to say, if there was only certainty and no doubt, there would be no mystery and therefore no need for faith. I love that because I find, it reminded me of the 2007 documentary called The Mormons by Helen Whitney. This is the time when President Hinckley opened the doors and let this woman spend a year going wherever she wanted, filming whatever she wanted, sacrament meetings, you name it. And she produced this documentary, which I don't think the church is very pleased with.
Was that the PBS one?
The PBS one, yes.
Okay, yeah.
I watched or listened to, 5-hour-long interview with her about her experience making the documentary. And someone asked her, was there anything that surprised you about the Mormons? And she said, yes, with certainty. She said, I grew up in this religion, converted to this one. We always hoped, we had faith, we believed. But to walk into an LDS church and see little children walk up to the pulpit and say, I know the church is true and I know this, she says, it blew my mind. I've never seen anything like that in any religion. And I find certainty to be just a buzzkill and just so dry and uninspiring and uncreative. And it would be, how refreshing would it be to hear one of the Quorum of the 15 say, I don't know if this is true or not, but I believe it. And I'm going to act on my beliefs. Wouldn't that be so fresh?
That would be nice.
Well, we don't have that.
I have two things to say about that. One is that when I was young, I do remember more people saying, I believe in the gospel of Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. And it was around in the 80s where people started saying, I know the church is true. And I was thinking to myself back then that, well, the gospel can be true, but the church is just an organization, right?
Right.
And it doesn't make any sense. That's when it became a gospel of obedience instead of love, in my opinion.
That got lost, that message. I agree.
Yeah, and one more thing I want to say about that is, the Jesus of Nazareth, who I love and respect, he talked a heck of a lot about belief and having faith, and very little, if anything, about certainty. And yet in his church today, you must profess certainty. Otherwise, you don't get a temple recommend, and you are thereby blocked from the ordinances of exaltation. It's a major shift that I don't think is healthy.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think it's one we don't talk about enough. But can you imagine how weird it sounds to other faiths to hear somebody in the church say, I know the church is true. What does that mean exactly? Like, if you really, like, it's such in speak, because for us, when we refer to the church, we're referring to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. When other evangelicals or other Christian faiths talk about the church, they're talking about the whole body of Christ, including all of the denominations. So when we say, I know the church is true, it's so confusing. Just what you're saying, Rob, it's not the church that's true. It's the gospel that's true, or the teachings that are true. And nobody else says, I know. I don't think I've ever heard another pastor from another religion, and I've attended lots and lots of different churches, ever say something like, I know, I absolutely know. To me, the other churches I've heard pastors speak and things like they say, you know, that I have a belief, or I have a faith, or I have an understanding, but it's never this surety. And I picked up on that same exact line that you did. Like, the certainty that's the greatest sin. That's the greatest thing to be afraid of.
That's
It's
right.
not what we know. I think Mark Twain said, it's not what we know for sure that gets us. It's what we know for sure that's not so, or something like that. I can't remember exactly what the...
It ain't what you know. It ain't what you know that gets you into trouble. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for certain that just ain't so.
That just ain't so. Yeah, exactly.
And
I
the
mean,
funniest thing is that chocolate is the only thing that's true.
and even that's not true. I mean, there's different denominations of chocolate. And, you know, like Hershey's is the chocolate of Mormonism, is it? No, anyway. No, I think that it's so problematic when we get into that. There's no place else in my life ever that I said I know for sure. No place else except in Mormonism, when I was a Mormon. And all the rest of it was like, well, I think I'm right about this, but I make a lot of room for like other people's opinions, because, you know, who am I at, you know, however old I was, to say I'm an expert at anything? You know, the hubris of that is like the absolutism. And I think that's what I've said, like, since leaving the church, my favorite thing has been the freedom to accept other people's viewpoints as valid, and to open my mind to the possibility of all of these other options that are available, and all these other explanations for deity and spirituality, to look at it and to look at where the people came from and why they came up with that particular tradition for faith, and to be able to accept it and say, that's a beautiful thing. I love that. Instead of belittling them, patting them on the head and say, oh, aren't you cute? You're wrong, but you're cute. You know, it just feels so demeaning to me to dismiss other people's faith traditions because it's not mine. You know, it's such a centrist kind of a view.
I love that. Wow. Yeah. I'm curious. I tried to give some room to that because, man, that really had the land. That was really good. I'm curious. We've mentioned a couple times already the umbrella scene in Conclave.
Oh, I love it.
Those cardinals in their red habits. I forget the exact name. There's a name, and the white umbrellas. What does it mean, though?
Exactly. It shows unity and that they're willing to move forward.
Yeah. After the attack. There's only two scenes from the courtyard looking down. The first one is they're all around, standing around
in different directions.
And and then the second one, they're all moving together. That is my most favorite scene.
It is beautiful, and I think you're right. But I also took from it, I'm like, wait, you notice all the umbrellas are white, which I'm sure they did research, but it probably is just the umbrellas they have at the Vatican City. But I thought, what a symbol is that of all these people deciding finally to move forward with unity. They have to take their innocent shields and protect themselves from what's going on outside. They have to actually go into Conclave. They have to be innocent of the outside world for the first time and go and move forward by and that's what, for me, this whole movie is about innocence. It's supposed to be about how, because you're like watching it and all these people talking about, I'm not worthy because, Lawrence is talking about, I'm not worthy because I have doubts. And he's not worthy because he has a child with that nun. Oh, he's not, they're not worthy. They're not worthy. And it's like, you're like watching going, who cares? Somebody has to be Pope. Somebody has to go out there and just pick one who's going to make the best decisions. And it's not John Lithgow. Why do we all agree it's not John Lithgow? Okay.
It's never John Lithgow.
It's never John Lithgow, right? Unless Harry is there.
That's right.
It's a Harry and the Hendersons reference. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I love that movie. I really appreciated the symbolism. If you look at the arc of this movie, it's a very monochromatic movie. There's black and white and gray and red, and that's pretty much it. Inside their chambers, the granite is gray and white. Their underclothes are all white. Their robes are red. On top of their hat, it's red. When the bomb goes off, the debris from the bomb is white, and it hits all of their red cloaks, and they're in this, they're covered with this white dust. And then when they come across the courtyard, it's the white umbrellas, and he picks his name as Pope the Innocent. So I agree with you 100% on that theme being innocence, and I always love the symbolism of the colors and how they try to paint the picture that way. I found it very visually stimulating, and I love that when films are like that.
And then the way that he enrolls Isabella Rossellini. Anyway, yeah, thank you. At first, there's a confrontation there, and then when she figures out, something's going to happen, and at the Xerox machine, and then when she comes out and says, we're supposed to be silent, but we have eyes and ears, and we can see. And I went, that was so beautiful.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
Yeah,
it was yeah. It was like,
the
wow.
other thing that I thought was so wonderful is the moment when the new Pope reveals really themselves, and says and makes the big speech. Is the moment where you notice they all look the most alike because they're all covered in the soot, in the white soot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because up until that moment, if you're watching, it's striking how the wardrobe, the props, and or the photography emphasizes every time you can see the cross of every person, every cardinal, and see how they're all so different. And it's like, it's striking in almost every scene. I said, is like, wow, they look so similar, and yet there's these striking differences in their vestments and in their crosses. It's like they're all so individual. It's not until they are in this shared sacrifice moment that has showered down upon them, or miraculously showered down upon them, that they are all the same, that you are all.
It's like how the priesthood in the Mormon church has to wear a colorful tie that's different to distinguish himself from the other suited male leaders or members. And the same thing with missionaries, right? Ties are important to missionaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I need to leave in 5 minutes. I'd like to make one last comment if I could.
Sure.
My second favorite line from the film was where the conversation where he says, I thought we were here to serve God. He says, don't be so naive. Remember that?
Stanley Tucci's character. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a war. It's a war. And you have to choose a side.
If I was going to make a critique, if we took away the ability of LDS leaders to speak, and all we could do is observe their actions, how they use their power, and I'm talking about what they do with their money and with their lawyers, I think more often than not, it's not about serving God. It's about keeping the machine running.
Exactly.
And I'm sure there's moments where it is about serving God and loving their fellow man, but I'm no longer naive.
Well, it's like when Innocent says, what is the church? It's what we do tomorrow. It's what we're going to do tomorrow. It's like nothing else matters but moving forward.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I've often said that I think that a lot of the things that take place in Mormonism are things that were put in place to keep the men in power and to keep the system running the way that it should be, and which is why we often hear or don't hear. There's deafening silence from Salt Lake City on a lot of issues. They don't speak when they should, and they do speak sometimes when they shouldn't. And I think the reasoning behind all of it and all of the policies and everything that they put out, tone deaf though they may be, is to keep the system functioning as it is right now, to keep the men who are in power right now, to continue to keep them in power. And I think it's sad because I see things like real problems that could be solved with the money that the church has, that they refuse to engage in issues. They don't want to pick a side, because picking a side means losing people on one side or the other. I think it's super unfortunate and sad.
Just let the candle burn from both ends.
Yeah.
Yep.
Gotta go, you lovely humans.
All right.
But
Take
thank
care.
you. You're free to dispute everything I said and just,
Okay.
I
And if
can't
we say
wait.
anything about you, you can always rewatch this
Consider
program
it.
and hear what we said about you after you left.
I'll get you in the comments section tomorrow.
Okay.
Thanks, Rob.
Bye, cuz.
So hopefully we can hear from Maven. Hopefully she'll come back and give her, because she spent, 2 long hours slogging through Conclave, and hopefully she'll come back. Oh wow!
There she is.
A miracle.
Marvelous
Speak
Maven.
of the Maven, and the Maven
Yeah,
appears.
so I really liked it. I did find it visually stunning. That was the thing that stood out to me most of all. So 100% agree there, and I appreciated. I wasn't sure because I hadn't heard a lot about it. I've heard it talked about with Heretic, and that a lot of people have watched both, but I didn't really know anything other than it's about choosing the Pope. What's interesting is this is, I guess, the background story. One of my one of the few people that I still do keep in touch with from my mission is actually a Roman Catholic. He's married to a Mormon, so she's a temple-going Mormon. He's a like 6:30 a.m. mass every day Catholic, and just full like Italian Philadelphian. His name is Tony because of course it is, so and he felt like he had us over all the time, and he felt really protective of us. It really bothered him that we were out going door to door, and he loved The Godfather. It's like all the tropes, but like Tony's real. And I started to call him Papa after a while. So anyway, and that's how he is in my phone, and then with his last name. So I remember having a discussion about this, and he talked about the smoke and everything. So I already knew about that at least a little bit. And just the whole like that they, until it's unanimous, they all stay there, and it just however long it takes. And I remember feeling like smug about it and just kind of thinking like, well, I guess that's what you have to do when you don't actually have revelation or the Lord on your side, even though I knew like it's going to be the oldest, I still felt like, well, God's in charge of that, because God could just kind of, bring home early whoever he doesn't want there, but it's still, so it just seems kind of funny to me now. I'm curious. I haven't asked him if he's seen it and what he thinks of it. I could definitely see him watching it and not being nearly like as offended as Mormons are about Mormon movies. I have heard that some Catholics have been offended by this as well, like in a similar way. I don't think he's the type to, so that's my one thought. I'm really curious what Papa thinks of the movie. But yeah, and I thought of that as I was watching about this conversation that I had over 10 years ago, with him discussing basically about how our two churches pick their next leader. Anyway, and then I popped up to say I really did love the twist at the end. I've heard some people, I watched one video of a guy saying like, I don't know if it was necessary. I liked everything that happened before up to that point, but I really liked it. Not that I feel like in this scenario, no one would ever know except those on the very, very inside. So I think a lot of the progress or the greatness that, could come societally from something like this happening would just not happen if it's not ever known. But I just really loved the idea of it. So anyway,
This movie actually came 55 years too late for me, because when I was young, when I was 10 or so, I was thinking about maybe I should go on a mission, but I was afraid of going on a mission. But I knew the church was true. And so I thought, well, maybe instead of knocking on doors, I'll just become Catholic and then work my way up and become Pope. And then when I became Pope, just tell everybody, hey, it's the Mormon church that's true. And then I'd get a billion converts and just be the best missionary ever. But I didn't know how to go about it. And so, and I'm kind of a little bit too old maybe to start, but that was just my thoughts as a 10-year-old.
Wow.
I think that's fabulous. That's
So
a
anyway,
genius plan.
That's our show. Thanks everybody for watching.
wait,
as
was
far
Dave
as, like-
going to say something? He's popping
Yeah.
on.
Oh yes, Dave can say something if he has anything to say about our discussion so far. You haven't seen Heretic or Conclave yet?
Megan ordered me to join, so I'm here.
Okay,
right.
welcome.
Yeah.
Here to brush his hair.
And so, yes, does anybody have any last comparisons? Anybody think that together they're a tandem? I didn't hear anybody talk about Hairclave, like
No,
Barb.
I
combine the two.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
honestly, I thought that Heretic was going to be more like what Conclave turned out to be, which was just just cerebral, just that kind of stuff. So yeah, so I think agree. I think Tim, you said this earlier about it kind of when it gets into like the more horror film gore stuff, it's kind of like that kind of pulled me out a lot.
Yeah.
I was expecting something more like Conclave, but yeah, that's it. Both great movies. Yeah, if you don't like gore or horror, then Conclave would definitely be your.
If you want political intrigue and a really good story, Conclave is your story to watch.
I thought that it's poignant to see that in Conclave, their church is true. It's the miracle occurs, and the leadership is divine, and it is innocent. And that the way they get there is going to strike a lot of Catholics in the wrong way. Okay. But that's the message they're going with. Whereas in Heretic, I really do think that the point is that there's a fervent belief of the antagonist and the fervent belief who I think is not altogether a true atheist, because he does believe that he's sending these girls to some kind of salvation. But that at the end of the day, I think that shot with the lost signal on the phone is the filmmaker's subtle way of saying, and it's all not true. It's all not true. It's just people trying to become better people or failing or succeeding at it. But it's all BS. And so it's like, those for me are the 2 points where it's like, okay, well, these not parallel, but maybe perpendicular in almost perfect fashion. I feel
foil or a mirror.
It's hard to do a compare and contrast because they're so different.
Yeah. So to me, Heretic is about that.
Yeah.
Belief is something you have to be very careful with, and you should do more investigation, even though more investigation didn't really help Mr. Reed all that much. But think for yourself no matter what. And Conclave to me was more about churches are run by flawed individuals and flawed systems, but if there's at least one good guy, we can all vote for him in the end.
Yeah.
I might check out Conclave. I don't know, like the trailer for Heretic just didn't resonate with me. I saw a lot about it from both sides, and people are like, yeah, it's this epic horror movie that is going to be off the wall good. And I've heard good things about it, but to me, it's just like, it doesn't strike me as like a horror movie I am used to. So
it's that genre, but it's not quite there.
It's like more of a thriller, isn't it?
It's a psychological
horror. It's not even a thriller. It's all psychological.
Psychological thriller with a little bit of horror sauce sprinkled on it.
He borrowed a lot of. He borrowed some from
Horror
Hitchcock,
sauce.
and yeah, there's.
Papa loved
Yeah,
Hitchcock.
for me,
anyway.
yeah, I'm resonating with that. It's hard to make a comparison between the two, and I'm not a fan of the horror genre at all. But what struck me is really interesting when I first went in to see Heretic for the first time. It was like I kind of basically knew what was going to happen up to the point that they opened the doors, right? Because a lot of that is given away in the trailer. So I kind of knew what to expect up until that point. I don't like gore doesn't bother me. Aliens, stuff I think is not likely to happen doesn't bother me. The psychological thrillers always terrified me to death. So going to this movie, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do with this. But what I found really interesting is that I was not really scared at all of what was going to happen in this movie. And I think part of the reason is because since I have deconstructed a fear of hell and the devil, this stuff doesn't bother me anymore, because like I've been face to face with some pretty evil, terrible people, and having healed from that and knowing now that I have the power to face that and come out okay on the other end, like this stuff doesn't scare me anymore. I found that to be just really eye-opening. It was personal revelation.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious now if actually maybe the same is true for me. I haven't really checked it because a lot of horror movies do deal with demons and, this kind of religious imagery. So I am kind of curious now if actually these will not be as scary to me anymore, because I felt the same with Heretic. I was just kind of like, like what's going on here, and like, but I wasn't scared. I genuinely wasn't, and so now I almost want to maybe look at something that I would not have wanted to watch before and see like if it just is ridiculous to me. But I did want to say I don't like watching horror movies. I am really fascinated in their deconstruction, and because a lot of them really are mirrors to society and what society is scared of. And it's you can learn, I think you could almost learn more about where a population is by the horror movies they put out than by any other genre, romance, action, anything like that. Yeah.
I agree.
And so for that reason, it's really fascinating to me, but I just don't like to watch them myself. So, I mean, I love seeing other people break things down and kind of show what it is that these things are playing with. And I really love what they show. Anyway, that's my final thought on it.
So Maven, you're going to have Maven wants to talk about her show that she's going to do this Friday.
Yeah. So I changed the name of, or I guess started a new channel for reproductive rights instead of Dear Pro-Life Dad, which is kind of focused on a more personal relationship and maybe just the angst towards people who are unreachable. I actually wanted to expand and broaden it. So I have a new channel. It's called When We Choose. I'll go ahead and put it in the chat here. It's still very hugely a work in progress. And so I know it's the holiday, but I did set up just kind of a supporter meeting for Friday at 6 p.m. Pacific time. So that would be 7 Mountain. I think that's a 9 Eastern. So yeah, youtube.com When We Choose. It's unlisted. So it'll be like sort of somewhat private so if you're interested in going on, message me on the channel or through Facebook or somehow to let me know, and I'll get you the information to join either on Twitch or on YouTube. Like I said, it'll be an unlisted video. And then also I think Patreon, I might do it there as well. And I'm just going to share some things that I've got going for it, some upcoming things, interviews and subjects that I want to cover. And if people, who are knowledgeable on those things, who want to come on, and other just things I'm trying to work out or need help with or suggestions for, like, for example, like for a Patreon, what tier names, people might have in mind for something like that. just things like that. And I do have hopefully an interview coming up soon with some pro-lifers who reached out to me to talk about some issues, which I really appreciate. So anyway, it's in the chat again. When we choose, just let me know if you want to be part of that and if you want to try to help me out in some way, and or hang out. It is Friday, so if you've got holiday plans, I understand. But I appreciate everyone's help and support.
Awesome.
All right, now that Rio for Life Kim D is here, it's time to say goodbye.
Bye.
Yes, thanks everybody for watching. Like,
Bye.
share, subscribe, do all those things. Check out everybody's channels that are here. Megan's, Maven's, Jean's, Joe's. Just this is somebody donate to Tim sometime this week or next week so he can go to Thrive.
Donate to Maven. It's the holidays, the gift of giving. Donate all of your money to Maven.
That's right. The gift of giving. Thanksgiving. Thanks for Maven. Right.
Right.
So anyhow, we'll see you next time.
See you next time. Happy Thanksgiving.
Take care. Guten Tag. Schlaf wohl. Traumst du sie?